Thank you so much for attending my PowerPoint presentation on the weirdest balance changes in Dota 2 history. When Valve got too silly. First on the list is probably the single strangest facet Valve ever added to the game. When the mechanic was first introduced to Dota, one of Magnus's options was reverse polarity. This was an ultimate rework that effectively flipped RP on its head. Instead of wrapping the entire enemy team in a burrito and setting up insane wombo combos, our RP would instead scatter them throughout a massive radius. When hit, enemy heroes would fly off 700 units away from the center of the RP, effectively scattering them throughout a fight. It's a funny idea on paper, blinking behind the enemy team and shoving them into the gaping maw of your other cores, but in practice, it was completely useless. The movement caused by this facet was agnostic towards impassable terrain, so it was possible to shove the enemy team up their own high ground and into safety rather than certain death. On top of that, it also had a massive opportunity cost because picking this meant that you were giving up the normal reverse polarity, one of the single best teamfight spells in the entire game. This facet was in the game for 7 months, which raises even more questions. Did Valve legitimately think that players would eventually figure out how to use this properly? Did they know something that we didn't? Regardless of why, the only thing we have left of our RP is memories of how terrible it was and some clips of Pangoliers getting shot off into space in the middle of their ulti. In my opinion, the worst part of this facet was how awful it was to say. Reverse polarity makes it sound like you're trying to sing the cha-cha slide in the middle of a team fight. It's also a double negative. Why didn't they just call it polarity? Dota 2's underlying statistics system is already one of the most complicated in all of competitive gaming, but for a few key days, Valve decided to make it even worse. When 7.20 dropped in late 2018, Valve included the dubious patch note that Brewmaster's Cinder Brew could be ignited by fire-based abilities. Now, Valve specifically outlined which heroes have fire-based abilities, and the list was mostly sensical. However, the vast majority of the heroes capable of applying fire damage had no business playing as a pause 4 in a lane with Brewmaster. Your only sensible options were Ogre Magi and Phoenix, and I guess you could do Batrider if you really wanted to. A couple of them also just didn't make any sense. Axe's Battle Hunger was one of the abilities able to ignite Cinder Brew, and I have zero idea why. We can only assume that Valve was LARPing as Brewmaster IRO when they came up with this patch note, because it got removed after only 5 days. If this system had somehow been successful, it would have opened a massive can of worms for the future balance of Dota. Imagine a world where heroes like Zeus and Storm Spirit are super effective against a Morphling because he's made out of water. Worse yet, Ancient Apparition maybe would have started taking bonus damage from all of the same things that ignited Cinder Brew. Adding an additional layer of elemental rock, paper, scissors on top of Dota's already complicated gameplay would have been an absolute nightmare, and I'm glad that Valve came to their senses after less than a week. Here's one that's very near and dear to my heart and is actually still in the game. In case you didn't know, Wraith King is capable of manually activating reincarnation in order to pass himself away. Valve added this ability back in the New Frontiers update 7.33, and it's been in the game as an option ever since. Notably, this was the same update that made it so that Wraith King will spawn skeletons on enemy heroes whenever he goes down. I guess Valve had the play pattern of you walking into the entire enemy team and just popping reincarnation yourself in order to jumpstart the process. Now, I'm not usually prone to theory crafting, but ever since they added this ability, I've been trying to come up with ways to use it effectively in games and not get reported for griefing. The best I can come up with is that when a teamfight starts and Razor begins using static link on you, you can just pop reincarnation to end it prematurely. Sure, you're now wasting 90% of your HP pool, but at least the Razor hits for slightly less damage. This is obviously a garbage strategy, but I really like the idea of a Razor casting static link on you in lane and you just being like, nah dude, I'm out. Now once you hit level 25 and you get the ability to cast your Q on everyone you die near, it might be slightly worth considering if you're already low HP. But for now, the ability to kill yourself on command for effectively no reason remains one of the greatest expressions of free will in all of Dota 2. It's up there with teleporting right into the enemy fountain as soon as you spawn with Nature's Prophet. Before moving on, I'd like to quickly mention that I've started a Patreon to help keep this channel sustainable. The lowest tier is just $3, while the higher ones give access to goodies like extra bonus videos every month, handwritten letters of thanks, custom audio recordings, and MS Paint doodles. Use code PUGNACHAN for 20% off your first month. Wraith King's 13th reason isn't the only thing Valve added in the New Frontiers update. They also decided to make Warden even more complicated. After this patch came out, Warden's suite of spells would completely change depending on which side of the river he was born on. If he was on the Radiant side, all of his abilities worked as normal, and the weird versions were put on the Tempest double. But if you were playing on Dire, you were stuck laning with all of the weird versions of the abilities you know and love. Flux dealt only half the slow it usually does, but deals about 50% more damage. Magnetic Field got a longer duration, and instead of providing evasion, would increase your attack range and apply a flat amount of magic damage to every right click. Lastly, Spark Wraith would charge up way faster and apply an even better movement speed slow, but would deal a fraction of the damage as a trade-off. Now keep in mind, no matter which side you were playing on, your clone would have the opposite version of your abilities, meaning that you had to manage all of these. The worst part of this is that you couldn't rely on your muscle memory for Magnetic Field. You'd have to actively sit and think about which side of the game you're playing on in order to put down a giant bubble of evasion that could make or break your team in a fight. Now I thought that this was just a funny haha by Valve and they would revert it after a couple of weeks, but I was wrong. After just over a year, they finally removed it and instead used it for his facets. Now you got to pick before the game started if you were going to play the original Arc Warden or the remixed one, and pretty much everybody picked the original. It's very funny to me that in an era where Valve was simplifying heroes like Tinker and Techies, they decided to make Arc Warden of all heroes way more complicated. I wrote a little bit about Valve's more successful experiments. Feel free to read it if you like. And to round things off, let's take a look at the weirdest neutral item that's ever been in Dota. Tome of Aghanim was a consumable tier 2 neutral item that gave one hero a temporary Aghanim Scepter. The effect lasted only 3 minutes and didn't give any of the stats, only the ability itself. The result was a temporary Super Saiyan power-up for whichever hero was lucky enough to find it, or whichever enemy hero was lucky enough to steal it from you, because back then, neutrals just dropped themselves on the ground. This item is already quite silly, but the funniest part of it all is its IRL duration. This item lasted a grand total of 48 hours in the game before Valve removed it with a letter patch. Now I've done quite a bit of research, I've even gone to the 4th page of Google, and strangely enough, I can't seem to figure out why it got removed. Some anecdotal accounts claim that it was completely overpowered, but everything that I've read doesn't seem to indicate that at all. I've also kind of ran the numbers in my head, and I can't think of a single hero that this would be particularly broken on. In fact, that honestly sounds kind of bad. Consumable neutral items were way more common when the mechanic was brand new, so it doesn't really stand out from that perspective. And a 3-minute duration is shorter than an Aegis. I fail to see how this could result in a power spike that ends the game before 25 minutes. I assume that there's just something I'm missing here, but I've combed looking for forums of people complaining about it, Reddit threads, there's really just nothing. The article from Esports that was published announcing its removal doesn't even state any opinion on it. At this point, it's really just a historical novelty for Dota 2 fans, but the lack of information on it makes it strangely mysterious. Anyway, I'm just glad that there was a time in Dota's history where you could take a puff off of Aghanim's peace pipe and ride that high for a grand total of 3 minutes. In conclusion, Dota 2 is an experimental game, and you should absolutely play it. If I had my way, I would bring back getting gold from denying creeps, which would give me one more reason to hate my position 5 player. Peace on planet Earth.